Chelik Chavav, volume 26, the first Sicha for Parshas Ki Sisa. This Sicha will explain the idea, the concept of the half shekel, that although on the one hand it was a physical material coin, yet it became fire, spirit, or passion, and a tremendous takeaway lesson from this practically to our day-to-day lives. As an introduction, to familiarize ourselves with some of the concepts that will be explained in the Sicha. So whenever the Torah says zeh, this, that is an indication that that thing is present, that that thing is actually physically there, visible, or perhaps even tangible. Otherwise, the word zeh would not apply. Another thing, in the course of the Sikha, the Rebbe mentions the idea of a shtat magid, which basically means a city preacher, which was common in yesteryear, something to be familiar with, that every city typically had in their employment a rav, a rabbi, who was in charge of all the halachic matters in the city and the general spiritual character of the city. However, on a practical level, the person who spoke to the people, so to speak, the person who inspired the people to go in these righteous ways, was called a magid, a shtot magid, like a preacher, somebody who would talk to the people, somebody who had a special way with affecting people, with inspiring people with his words. And then, of course, you had a chazan. Another thing to be familiar with, there are three categories of mitzvot. We have mishpatim, edut, and chukim. As we know, basically mishpatim are those mitzvot which, let's just say in plain simple English, make sense. Those things that we can understand the rationale of them. In fact, some of them are even such that we would have come to the same conclusions had the Torah not been given to us, chas v'shalom. Then there are edut. Edut means testimonials, the various observances that we have to commemorate and memorialize various events. And then we have chukim, statutes. And this is going to be the one that we're going to focus on in the Sicha. A choik means, as the Talmud tells us, so to speak, gzeira, gazarti. Hashem, so to speak, says, I have decreed a decree, you do not have the capacity, the ability to really understand it. And therefore, these are the category of mitzvot of things that we do not understand. Another thing to be familiar with is, in general, the way the world is divided, the physical world, is that everything is divided into four various elements. Or as the Rambam says, everything consists of these four various elements. Eish, Ruach, Mayim, Ofer. Fire, Ruach means wind, or something can mean spirit, Mayim, water, and Ofer, earth, dust. Now, it's obvious that when you look at the contrast between these four, Ofer is the lowest because it's the most physical, whereas Eish is the most spiritual. As we'll see in the Sicha, there's also a spiritual counterpart to this, so to speak. Let's jump right into the Sicha. So on the verse that says, a verse in chapter 30, verse 13 in our parsha that says, Zeh yitnu. Hashem says to Moshe, this they shall give. As we said in the introduction, this means that it's present. And therefore the Chazal tell us, our sages tell us, that a sort of matbeya shel eish, a coin of fire, Hashem took out and showed it to Moshe, and he says, this is what they should give. Something like this is what they should give. Now, of course, the question is, why was it necessary for Hashem to show Moshe a coin of fire? The Tosfos explains, this is one of the primary commentaries on the Talmud, that Moshe wondered. Moshe had a question. He had a general question on this. And the question was, Hashem says that they shall give this half coin in order to achieve, to bring about an atonement on their souls. In fact, the initial donation of machat shekel, of the half a shekel at that time, was to atone for the terrible sin that they all sinned on their souls, the sin of the golden calf. So Moshe wondered, how can a half a coin, how can any coin serve as an atonement, to wipe away? The Hebrew word for atonement means to wipe away the sin. Now, the Rebbe asks, what is this question that Moshe had? Why at all was Moshe astonished by this? Any shtot magid, any city preacher, your common rabbinical preacher that preaches to the people, is able to explain it. And when obviously your common preacher, even the greatest of rabbis, their level of intellect doesn't come anywhere near to Moshe's level in intellect, and yet they're able to make sense out of it. They're able to rationalize it and say that every time a Jew does a mitzvah, he gets a reward. And over here, in this case, you can say for the performance of the mitzvah of half a shekel, they were rewarded with an atonement. So how come Moshe doesn't seem to understand this? Another few questions. Okay, Moshe needs to be explained this concept, but why a coin of fire? What is the significance specifically of fire? Why not just a coin? And, of course, the obvious question, how does this answer his question? How is showing him a coin of fire even answer the question that Moshe has? Now, perhaps we could have attempted to answer that, say, well, Hashem showed him a coin of fire to tell him that when a Yid does a mitzvah with a physical object, especially if he does it with passion, with excitement, this becomes like a fire. This becomes like a spiritual fire. But the truth is, this doesn't serve to answer the question. This actually will strengthen, so to speak. This actually will underscore the question and make it an even stronger question. Why? Because let alone the fact that it doesn't answer the question. Because if so, then the question is, if that's the case, if that's all that it's saying, that when a Jew does a mitzvah, it turns it, and especially does it with passion, it's like a fire, then what was Moshe's question in the first place? Certainly Moshe was aware of that. This is something that anybody knows. Something like we said before, any common city preacher knows this. And, of course, the question then would be, moreover, this idea, this concept, is not exclusive to the half shekel. This concept, perhaps, is in every single mitzvah. So what makes this thing unique? And another question, to add to this, if this is all that this was saying, if this is all that it was answering, this is the entire answer, why did Hashem find it necessary to take an actual coin of fire and exhibit it to Moshe and show it to Moshe? Why not just convey the message to him, communicate it to him, tell it to him, explain it to him, like most things in the Torah were just told to Moshe and he understood it? So there's obviously something more to here. Something more here that's playing a role, in the question of Moshe, and therefore in the answer that Hashem gives him, by giving him an actual sample, by showing him, exhibiting to him a coin of fire. The answer lies in how do we appreciate the, quote, reward of a mitzvah. Whenever we do a mitzvah, there's a reward for mitzvah. There's two ways to look at it. On the one hand, you can say, the mitzvah itself, inherently, the idea of the mitzvah, the aspect of the mitzvah, results in a certain type of reward. That means the point, the spirit of the mitzvah. As you do the mitzvah, therefore it manifests itself into the reward. That's one way of looking at it. But on the other hand, however, we can look at it, and this is more practical, that the mitzvah itself and the reward don't necessarily have a innate connection. It's rather that the mitzvah, as we observe it, as Hashem desired us to observe it, as Hashem wants us to observe it, then Hashem, quote unquote, decided that this and this will be the reward for that. In other words, it could be more arbitrary, but this is Hashem's will. It's not inherently, so to speak, derived from the actual aspect or nature of the mitzvah. It's rather something that is decided by Hashem's will, which is beyond any understanding, which is beyond any comprehension. Case in point, just as we have mitzvahs, as we mentioned in the introduction, that there are a different category of mitzvahs. There's a category of a mitzvah that's called chukim, which we have no understanding for. We have no rationale. We're not meant to have any appreciation as to why this mitzvah is a mitzvah, what it affects, and how it's special. So too, likewise, the reward for a mitzvah, there are many times when there's a reward for a mitzvah that is incomprehensible. It not only doesn't make sense, it's not meant to make sense to us as to why this is a reward for this particular mitzvah. And this is what happened over here. The fact that a half a shekel, the donation of the half a shekel, serves as a atonement for his soul, perhaps this falls into the category of chukah, of statutes. There's no rationale to it. Why? Because the half shekel, and for that matter, any amount of money, has no significance, has no value, has no worth in comparison to what the value of a soul is, let alone the redemption of the soul, the atonement of the soul, the cleansing of the soul. So there's obviously no rational connection, there's no rational correlation between the half shekel, the donation of this machatzis shekel, and the quote-unquote reward, the result that Hashem prescribes in the Torah. And therefore, this is what was going on over here. You see, it's true that whenever we do a mitzvah, it becomes like a fire. But the coin itself remains a physical coin. Why? Because where does the aspect of fire come from? Where does the aspect, the idea, that means the fire aspect of the mitzvah, where is it? That's more of the spiritual effect of the mitzvah. But the coin itself remains a physical coin. The coin itself remains what it was before. Here, Moshe Rabbeinu, this was his question. What is going on over here? Now we know that Moshe Rabbeinu was the ultimate intellectual. Moshe Rabbeinu embodies Seichel of Torah, the ultimate intellect of Torah. And the intellect of Torah demands to understand things, or at least to know what could be understood and what not. So when Moshe Rabbeinu sees that the reward of a half a shekel is a redemption for the soul, in other words, it becomes like a fire that is able to burn away all the negativity. It doesn't remain a physical coin, but it becomes a spiritual thing, and it's able to burn everything away. He figures, well, I don't see the connection. I don't see how inherently or innately in a coin there is this aspect of atonement, there's this aspect of cleansing. So it must be that this is, so to speak, like a decree, that this falls into the category of chukim. This is the way Hashem decided. This is the way Hashem willed it. Well, if that's the case, Moshe looks in the list of chukim, and this doesn't appear in the list of chukim. So he doesn't understand. And therefore he asks, he wonders, what is going on over here? Is this a chayk? Is it not? If it's not a chayk, then how come I don't see the connection between the half a coin and the aspect of atonement that it affects? And therefore Hashem showed him a coin of fire. Remember, we wanted to know why Hashem had to show it to him? Hashem showed him actually this coin, even though it's a physical coin, it becomes a coin of fire. In other words, this is not some kind of decree. This is not some kind of irrational desire of Hashem. When I say irrational, I mean that's not given to any rationale. That's not meant to be comprehended. But rather that the coin itself, in this case, in the half a shekel case, it becomes like a fire. And this, the fact, it becomes a fire. And this makes the half shekel mitzvah different than any other mitzvah, even the mitzvah of tzedakah. For example, when it comes to the mitzvah of tzedakah, you give charity. Of course, as we said in the beginning, every mitzvah generates a fire, a passion, a spiritual fire. But it's not the actual coins themselves. It's not the actual physical currency that you give to the poor person that becomes the fire. Rather, the effect that it has. In other words, the effect of the money that you give to the poor person, that now they're able to sustain themselves. Now they're able to buy their needs. That means the spiritual aspect of it, which in any case is the spiritual aspect of thing, which is anyway in the spirit, that becomes a passionate spiritual fire. But the coins themselves remain what they are, physical coins. They don't get elevated, so to speak, to become something spiritual. Whereas in the half shekel, Hashem was showing him that the coin itself, although it's a physical coin, it becomes fire. Now, although, of course, he took those coins and they melted them down to form the foundation, the sockets of the Mishkan, of the walls of the tabernacle. So if you can argue, well, they are physical coins. So Hashem is telling him that the truth is, and that's why he took it out from heaven, that you should know that although they appear as physical coins, but in truth, indeed, once they were donated as the half shekels, they are fire. They are spiritual coins. How is this possible? Because Hashem showed it to him. Hashem is the one, so to speak, who performed, who made this novelty. He effected that when you give a half a shekel, it becomes fire. And this explains why it wasn't enough for Hashem to, so to speak, just say it to him, just explain it to him, just tell him about it, but he had to actually do, so to speak, an action. Hashem is the one who created, who innovated this novelty. Typically, when you do a mitzvah with a physical thing, like we said before, I'm just summarizing, the davar hagashmi, the physical thing, remains something physical, and the fire aspect of it is the effect of the mitzvah. Here, by machzis hashekel, and that's what Hashem innovated, created here, by taking it and making it and showing it to Moshe, this coin itself, as it is still in its physical state, it becomes like a coin of fire. This represents the fusion, the connection between two opposites, the unity of the material and the utmost spiritual. And this explains why Hashem had to do it himself, and he had to show it to him, to actually make it happen, to set it into motion. And now we'll also appreciate why specifically a fire. Because as we said in the introduction, the four physical elements also have their counterpart, so to speak, in a spiritual sense, in the spirit. There's also four. We find sometimes a reference, for example, Michael, it says Sar Shel Mayim. The angel Michael, he's considered to be the minister of water. So there's an aspect, there's a concept, there's a spiritual concept of water up there. And likewise, Ruach, wind, and Afar. And then there's Eish. Well, just like down here, the literal physical elements, Eish is the most spiritual. So it's understood that a spiritual fire, an Eish, a fire that comes from above, obviously is the greatest and highest level within the spiritual realm. And this is what Hashem was showing him. That this simple physical coin, when given as the half shekel, not only does it become spiritual, but it becomes a fusion with the highest point of spirituality. That you take a coin that is in the physical, if you think about it, where does a coin originate from? From the lowest of the four elements. A coin essentially is made from a type of sand, right? It comes from sand. In fact, not only does it come from sand, but it comes from the depth of the earth, the depth of the sand, the depth of the lowest of the elements. And that connects to the highest of the spirit, which is the highest spiritual level that there is, the fire that comes from above. And they all come one. They become fused as one. What's a practical lesson for us? That although originally these half shekels were given to form the sockets, the foundation of the Mishkan of the tabernacle, but we know, as the sages tell us on the verse, V'osu limikdash v'shachanti b'seichon, that Hashem says, he instructs them that they shall make a mikdash, a sanctuary, and I will dwell in them. That it doesn't say I will dwell in it, but I'll dwell in them. That this tells us that each and every single Jew is a mishkan. Each and every single Jew is a sanctuary for Hashem. Thus, we also have spiritually our sockets, our adonim, our foundation. Moreover, the fact is that we also observe this custom of giving a half shekel before Purim. So we see that it does have a connection to us. What is the lesson? In other words, what do we take away from this? That we need to look at our mitzvahs, we need to view our mitzvahs, that it's not just, well, let's say when we do a mitzvah with a physical coin, we give someone some monetary help. We should not just look at the thing as it is something physical. Just not just view it as something, okay, I did a physical act, and there's some spiritual aspect that was affected some way up there. But rather look at the physical thing itself and say, this now becomes a fire. This now becomes fused, becomes one with the highest of levels. And of course, when we inject into the performance of the mitzvah, our fire, our passion, our warmth, then most certainly there is the ultimate fusion of the lowest of the Gashmi to the highest of the Ruchni.